Hey, how's it going, everybody? Once again, this is the Above Limits podcast with Sinbad and olympusMons. We're doing an impromptu discussion on today's developments in Turkey. We have a military coup going on as we speak, and Sin is our Middle East expert, and get his whole breakdown of what's going on there. So, Sin, go ahead and take it away, and we'll discuss this topic a little bit.
Right. On a day not too long after tragic events concerning Islamic terrorists, I feel that today the developments in Turkey cast a large shadow over the Islamic world, showing that even certain nations that are believed to be secular, that are believed to be democratic, even they are not safe havens anymore, that a military coup like this still being allowed to happen, there's no excuse for it. We saw it happen in Egypt not too long ago. And for this to happen in Turkey, I think the group of people who are doing these military coups, even in Syria or whatnot, it's a way for them to retake their nation away from the direction they were going. For instance, if Turkey is going towards being part of the European Union, then this faction who is staging this coup, they're obviously trying to bring their nation towards a Middle Eastern Union. In other words, the only word out there for that is an Islamic state. And it's a very dangerous word to use. And now the fact that the government is no longer in control, it leaves a big question mark as to, does the destabilization of all these nations, will it eventually make them all team up together in one grand illustrious Islamic state as prophesized, or are these staged coups, destabilization, are they actually, the act of terrorists, and is it actually pushing the Middle East apart? I, for one, believe that it's actually going to unite them in the end, and that's why it's so dangerous.
Yeah, it's almost obvious of what's happening. You do have on the outside what seems to be a democratic government. A lot of people that join ISIS, that's the one place they stop to, like, before they go to Syria, or before like all the Americans that go to join ISIS, they end up in Turkey, and from there they're brought into Syria and join into ISIS and the fanaticism. So when you say the previous terrorist attacks, you're talking about the what happened in France and Nice?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, big deal, man. France has been the start of, when the Bataclan attack, 300 people killed, 4 attackers just straight up executing as many people as possible before blowing themselves up. And then the recent events where guy just gets in a truck and starts mowing down people, kills 85 and injures 100 and something people. I mean, it's a different type of tactic. It is a war we're fighting. It's a war that's being fought. You always got to watch out with war because of the people behind war that end up, have nefarious, reasons why they go into war with people.
And for our generation, people our age, they don't seem to understand why the Middle East and the way these wars start, these civil wars, they don't understand why it's happening, because we weren't alive during the time of World War I and going into World War II. And unless you have a real big background in the history of World War I, you will not get the big picture. The idea of the Middle East as these little independent nations never existed. At the time of World War I, there was a caliphate. There was a global understanding that those nations, they were all united by their common religion, and they were a religious state, as opposed to a nation that had a separation of church and state, a secular nation. So looking at that history and seeing who the losers of those world wars were, and how each winner, you have United States, and whether it was the League of Nations or the United Nations, the winners had carved out and divided the Middle East amongst them. And France was one of the main nations that took care of Syria. Syria has very serious ties to France in terms of colonization and warfare. And after the World War, how a certain colony of the winners adopt their form of government. And so when we look at the Middle East now, each of these civil wars happening, what it does is it removes the head of state. For example, Saddam Hussein. For example, Muammar Gaddafi. These generals that formed coup d'etats that took control of their nation and, for lack of a better term, improved their nation. They were killed. They were plucked. And when you uproot a leader like that, you destabilize a region so poorly that the nations cannot survive on their own. The only way for them to survive now is to form a coalition of nations and to unite under one flag of Islam, whether it's an extreme version or a moderate version. They don't care. When their nations are destabilized to that extent, they become desperate for economic gain. They become desperate for survival. So with this turning point in Turkey, I think that we're seeing maybe Erdogan as number 3, as the third and final king with no kingdom, getting taken out of the picture, if that happens in the upcoming days, and that this might be the stepping stone to a huge change in the citizens of the Islamic world, to where they will actually support the idea of a caliphate or an Islamic state. Right now, there is no support for it because, of course, ISIS, the extremists in the region of Syria and Iraq, have hijacked the idea of an Islamic state and have branded their own type under the leadership of Baghdadi and Omar, who have both been killed in airstrikes in the last 2 weeks. So now that there's no leadership in ISIS, there's disarray in the Middle East. I can see a turning point where the Islamic world actually will want a caliphate, but under a moderate leadership.
Yeah, it only seems obvious to set up an Islamic state. It's like duh. You have people invading your countries, and you have your set of ideals. I mean, it's only right to ally and to overthrow people that don't agree with your set of ideas. And ultimately, it only can bring trouble for Western countries, and that's pretty much it.
Right. I just read an article that stated that, what you just said, and it stated getting rid of ISIS should be a top priority, but that does not solve the problem in the Middle East. It does not solve terrorism. Getting rid of ISIS will just mean that another group will come along after them. We know that already. The solution that I proposed 2 years ago, when we talked about it, I was laughed at and mocked. And most people who had that idea should be laughed at and mocked. For someone to step up and say, give them what they want, give them an Islamic state, give them what appears to be a religious dictatorship, just give it to them. that seemed like a crazy, far-fetched, stupid idea. But today, in 2016, it seems like the most logical thing to do. It will give them a democratic vote. It will get rid of all these quote unquote generals that have formed coup d'etats. It will get rid of all the dictatorships where there are leaders that have been in power for more than 10 years. And it will finally give us a man who can wear a suit and sit down at a table and speak with other politicians of the world. In today's Middle Eastern society, we cannot sit down and negotiate or even have talks with any head of state because their leaders are not these democratically elected politicians. And that brings us to one of the finer points, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad 2017 comeback.
What happens then?
Well, as you know, he's been going under the radar. He does have a website. He is very active. He does sit on a high council that serves as advisors to the supreme leader. If anything, he has been promoted to a higher position than president of Iran. And his opinions of the current leader of Iran are actually supported by the supreme leader. So it is very likely that there will be a split vote in 2017 in the Iranian elections, and he has a very high chance of winning. He is the Bernie of the Middle East. He appeals to people that are in college. He appeals to the masses that are educated, to 15 to 35-year-olds, to the generation of people that will actually grow the economy. Those are the people voting or rooting for Ahmadinejad. He is the Bernie Sanders of the Middle East. He is a very dangerous man, in my opinion. If I was a U.S. CIA agent or a special forces person, I would highly advise President Obama or any future president of the United States that if there was an Imam Mahdi of prophecy to come to fruition, Ahmadinejad is your prime candidate. He is the person that has the potential to unite all these countries in disarray. And going after him in the same way that you go after Saddam, Gaddafi, so-and-so will not work. It will not work in his case.
So this is ongoing breaking news. What, you can only speculate what's going to happen. Either the government's going to ally with somebody with people from ISIS, and there goes a NATO country falling under ISIS control. Somebody that's very much in helping us stop ISIS in Syria, and we're using their air bases. You know what I mean? Where we start our missions, starting our operations in Syria, along with the work we're doing with the Russians. Where do we see this in your opinion? Where do we see this coup leading in the next couple of weeks?
I think that some people have generalized the understanding of what a secular Turkey is. Secular Turkey is not really Erdogan's Turkey. It's the people's Turkey. But Erdogan himself, the guy who has been kicked out of office, he is no different, in my opinion, than a Saddam Hussein or a Hosni Mubarak or a Mohammed Morsi. He is a man who sympathizes with the ideals of a united Islamic state. He actually, his belief system personally is that of almost a Sunni Muslim who, I wouldn't say supports ISIS because he probably doesn't, but he does want some form of Islamic state. And I think that getting rid of him pushes that to a side. I think that the coup actually doesn't help the Islamic State of ISIS. This military coup actually sets ISIS back a lot, because once the military is in power, remember, this military faction is going to take on the pact that, you know, Kerry and Putin and all these people have put together. They are going to do their own version of that. Okay, this military coup. So, in respect, Erdogan in power is actually better for these terrorist groups. And now that Erdogan is out of the picture, I can see these terrorist groups feeling the need to liberate Turkey, if that makes sense, for them to go back into Turkey, send their terrorist coalitions into Turkey from Syria, crossing the border, and dealing with the new Turkish government and performing acts of terrorism and starting war in local cities for the simple cause of liberating Istanbul, which is the most important city. It borders Europe. It connects the Islamic world to Europe. Once an Islamic State conquers Istanbul, that's it. It's game over. The actual belief within mainstream Orthodox Islam in regards to the message Muhammad preached to the people states that there will be an end time scenario before the return of the Messiah where coalitions and factions of Muslim warriors will go into Turkey and liberate it. Now, that made no sense a while ago. Like yesterday, that would have made no sense. That specific prophecy is an incorrect prophecy because, well, Turkey's liberated. No one wants to go there. Erdogan's in power. He's jumped from prime minister to president and given more constitutional powers to the president and made himself pretty much the supreme leader of Turkey. I didn't see it. I didn't see this prophecy actually making sense. Now that the coup happened, it's a scary thought. It's a scary thought that Islamist extremists will look at this prophecy and say, oh, this is what we need to do next. We need to go into Turkey and we need to liberate it. The same way that these jihadi Muslims are going into Egypt, trying to liberate it with these terrorist attacks in Egypt. They are responding to the coup against the democratically elected Mohamed Morsi. And the government was then taken over by Fattah al-Sisi, I think that's his name, the general who is now the leader. And now he has his hand full. There are tons of terrorist organizations in Egypt attacking them. I think the same thing will happen in Turkey.
All right. Well, here's a question. Do you think that the U.S., any type of government secret agency has any type of influence on this? Do you think that ultimately this is something planned, something happening, mischievous happening between our government agents and to see this go forward?
Unfortunately, I don't think America stands a chance in controlling chess pieces anymore. As much as we like to think we're a superpower, we've talked in our previous podcast, which should be up soon, about the fact that America has shifted from a dominant foreign policymaker to a weakened one, to where in order to maintain a presence over our citizens and to set an example that American government still controls things, we have shifted to domestic issues. And I think that transition to worrying about domestic issues within the United States is a strong proving point that Obama and the next president incoming will not be able to move chess pieces around, no matter how many Delta forces they send out there. The world has adapted to America. The world has adapted to modern warfare. They have responded with terrorism. They have responded with military coups. So the answer is no. I don't think America will control it. I think the way that these groups, we talk about conspiracies and control mechanisms and occult ideas and secret societies. But when I speak about them, when you speak about them, I don't think we literally mean they are clandestine groups that think they can control things. I think that they have their own goals and they pursue those own goals. But coincidentally, all the goals from all aspects seem to coincide at a central point. And so if we see something happens, yes, it is by coincidence in terms of, I use the word fate or destiny. So if America is doing something to control the Middle East, if it does work, then it was always meant to be that way, in my opinion. I don't think that a group of shadow government figures sit in a room and debate what to do with Turkey and then execute a plan, and then the next day Turkey is under fire. I don't think that's possible.
So you've been researching and collecting data on what you feel. You've been doing stuff with manuscripts, and you sent me a couple of them. And go ahead and explain to the audience what you've been working on and what that's all about.
The manuscript entitled Prophetic Kingdoms, the chapter on prophetic kingdoms, is an attempt to simplify the Israelite compilation of prophecies concerning the nations at the time in which a Messiah returns. Most of it comes from the book of Daniel. Now, when we get into religion, the important thing to note is that it doesn't matter if you believe these holy books are true or not. You can be an atheist, an agnostic. That is fine. What we are looking for, is the idea that powerful people in the world believe that these prophecies are true. So you and I, we may not believe in every prophecy that's been written down by an Israelite, by an Arab, or whoever. But the fact that the most powerful people in the world that can move pieces around, the fact that they believe these prophecies are true is very important. And that is kind of the reason why I seek to understand these prophecies. In Daniel, he talks about 4 great kingdoms rising. And there has always been a debate on which kingdoms those were, especially the last kingdom. It is a kingdom unlike any that they have seen. It's not like the kingdom of, if we want to get specific with the nation states, the British lion is a kingdom that we're all familiar with. The Russian bear is a kingdom we are familiar with. The Aztec jaguar, or what is the other name for the jaguar? It is the panther, or excuse me, it's an ocelot. It's basically a large cat also. The leopard, the word in the Bible used is leopard, is the symbol of the Aztecs and Mayans, the Americas. We are familiar with the Russian bear, the British lion, the leopard of the Americas. What we aren't familiar with is the 4th nation state, the 4th superpower. We know about the British Empire. We know about the USSR. We know about the United States of America. We know the 3 superpowers as classically defined in literature. The 4th superpower that Daniel talks about is an unknown factor. And the Israelite interpretation of that last and final superpower on earth is descriptive in that it is a violent nation state. It is a very violent nation state with insurgency, meaning they go out and stamp and crush and demolish. If I were to pinpoint what type of nation state today that is becoming a superpower is described by that, I would say it is the coming of an Islamic caliphate. I believe that that animal that Daniel saw, the 4th beast in his revealing, I believe that that was a future united Islamic state. And when we look at the Islamic prophecies, they match. And that is the scary thought, that the Muslims believe that their caliphate will come back one day before Jesus arrives. And that caliphate will be unstructured. Then they'll have a politician come and restructure that caliphate. And then after that politician dies, Jesus returns, and Jesus will become the third caliph of the largest caliphate ever in existence. And for the book of Daniel, an Israelite prophecy, to match that in a similar analogy, it tells me that the superpowers of the world, their leadership, if they happen to be Christian, Jewish, or Muslim leaders, if they were raised reading the Bible, if they were raised reading the Quran, if they were raised reading the Torah, when they make geopolitical decisions that influences religion and state, a lot of times they will make a decision that brings about prophecy. In other words, these prophecies are in a way self-fulfilled. And that is an idea that not a lot of people understand. They'll say, I'm going to stick to science, I'm going to stick to history. I'm not going to look at these religious or occult books and speak of prophecy or predictions. They're missing the big picture. We need to take all the data we have and how it all influences people who have power. And we need to look at that data so that we understand why things are happening. Because if we don't understand why things are happening, we're going to make the wrong assumption. And if we make the wrong assumption, then we're just ignorant.
So lastly, go ahead and explain the prophecy that you've been talking about for about 2 years now. You were thinking it would be Assad could be this last leader to be, executed or taken out of power to fulfill what you've been talking about.
Right. The book of Daniel goes in to further explain that this final kingdom, the animal analogy, has 10 horns on its head. And the angel reveals to Daniel that the horns represent kings. And it further says 3 horns are plucked or uprooted. And in the place of those 3 horns, 1 horn rises. Now, those 3 horns that are uprooted, again, if this nation state is the Middle East, the 3 kings or the 10 kings with no kingdoms and the 3 kings that are removed, I can completely understand and agree with Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi being those first 2 horns that are plucked or removed from office. The third one that is removed is a big question mark. Because remember, I always predicted it would be somebody that's going to show up in the news with his nation in civil war, so I thought it was Assad at first. But he's been evasive. He survived to this point. He hasn't been plucked or uprooted. Then I thought it was Mohammed Morsi. But he's still alive. He was sentenced to a prison sentence for 25 years. Then I thought it could possibly be Pervez Musharraf, another general, the leader of Pakistan, who is now facing trial for treason and a possible death sentence. So the candidate for the third king with no kingdom to die is almost like a weird Deadpool. And now the tables have turned to where Erdogan, the now deposed head of state from Turkey, has moved to the top of that list. If Erdogan is killed, he is the third king with no kingdom that is uprooted in the prophecy. So in 2 years' time, we've began to see that Bashar al-Assad he may not, in fact, be that third king that dies. He might, in fact, be the man of Islamic prophecy called the Sufyani. If you are familiar with the Islamic prophecies, there is a character in the times near the coming of the Mahdi, and he is called the Sufyani. And I do believe that Bashar al-Assad is the only leader in the Middle East that is physically similar to the description of the Sufyani, in that he's described as a lanky man, as a very tall, lanky, skinny type figure. And if you look at Bashar al-Assad, he has a basketball player's physique. He's very tall, lanky, and skinny. All the other leaders of the Middle East are pretty short and rotund, and they have some girth to them. Not so with al-Assad. So it's very interesting to look at these prophecies and see that what we may have thought as a Deadpool, the people at the top of the list, it all goes to nothing after this coup in Turkey just happened, because Erdogan is now at the top. If Erdogan dies, we can see that the new horn to rise in his place will in fact be the next leader of the Muslim world. As I stated before, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is making a comeback in 2017, and he fits the Islamic prophecy of the Mahdi in that he comes from Persia, and that he comes from the Shiite lineage. The belief is that the Mahdi will always come from a Shiite nation, and he will unite the Shiites and Sunnis under one banner, and that is the turning point in which all the nations can unite.
All right, people. That pretty much sum up everything that you want to say. You have any final thoughts, Sam?
Final thoughts are: life is questionable and life is short. In whatever time we as a human race have on this earth, we have to realize that it is just a blink of an eye, and that everything that has happened for a reason and will continue to happen. And I just want to leave the listeners with this final thought. No matter how bad things may seem to have gotten, if you think back 10 years ago and you think, wow, the world has really flipped and things are as worse as we could have ever foretold, I just want you to know that it can always be worse, and that you should always be thankful that it's not as bad as it could be. And I thank you guys for tuning in to this impromptu talk about the developments in Turkey. I hope that you all continue to stay listening, and please subscribe to the channel.
That's right. Subscribe to the channel. Like if you like the video. Share if you want to share it. Mainly just subscribe to the channel. We'll have more content coming up soon. This is Above Limits Podcast with olympusMons, and of course Sinbad with his expertise in the Middle East and bringing you the understanding that you need to know. So once again, you have a good day.